Bienvenidos artistas to Arte with Maestro William. Hoy vamos a estar leyendo este libro que se llama Equality's Call, The Story of Voting Rights in America. Está escrito por Deborah Dyson y está ilustrado por Magdalena Mora. Pero antes de empezar, por favor, que hace nuestro poema In la Quech a la Ken. In la Quech, tú eres mi otro yo. Si te hago daño a ti, me hago daño a mí misma. Si te amo y respeto, me amo y respeto yo. In la Quech a la Ken. Gracias, artistas. Pues, como saben, cada 4 años, en noviembre, aquí en los Estados Unidos y en otras partes de el mundo, tenemos la oportunidad de votar y escoger a los líderes que van a hacer decisiones por nosotros. Aunque a veces el proceso no es muy claro y a veces pues las personas que están haciendo este trabajo no siempre cumplen con sus promesas. Pero este libro habla un poquito de la historia que pasó aquí en los Estados Unidos. Y aunque otra vez no es perfecta la historia, pues vamos a leerla y vamos a estar preguntando unas cosas, ¿verdad? Vamos a hacer unas preguntas. Pero que empezar. Este libro se llama Equality's Call, The Story of Voting Rights in America. Written by Deborah Dyson and illustrated by Magdalena Mora. Que empezar. Y empieza así. In 1776, the founders of the United States of America declared that consent of the governed would be a key component of our country. Now, les quiero recordar que aunque están haciendo así que es founders of the United States of America, que recordar que ya había gente viviendo aquí con sus propias leyes, con sus propios pensamientos políticos, ¿verdad? Entonces las personas nativas o indígenas de los Estados Unidos pues ya tenían estos sistemas, y pienso que a veces unos sistemas mejores que el que está aquí, ¿verdad? So we got to remember that there was indigenous people in the Americas already, and there was, a consent decree that had already been created by the indigenous people here in the United States, right? So although it says the founders of the United States of America, there was already people living here. And they're still living here in many, many countries across, many cities across the US. But let's continue. In 1786, the founders of the United States of America declared that consent of the governed would be a key component of our country. The founders didn't always agree on everything, but they did all believe that the power of a government should come from the will of the people and that citizens would express their choices by voting in elections. But at that time, only some people were allowed to vote. Citizenship, or the legal status of being a member of a country, and the right to vote, or sometimes called a franchise, political franchise, or suffrage, were not available to all. As our nation grew, our understanding of democracy and rights grew too. Many people stood up and spoke up about abolition, the end of slavery, about citizenship, about enfranchisement, and about civil rights, or the equal opportunity for all. They also worked to end voter suppression, the practice of discouraging or preventing people from voting. They heard equality's call. So here we start with the story. Vamos a empezar con la historia. Voting rights. Our founders declared when our country began that consent of a governed was part of the plan. Through voting elections and representation, the voice of the people would strengthen our nation. In fact, though, for years, this great founding ideal was extended to some and for others not real. So not everybody had the opportunity to vote. No todos tenían la posibilidad de votar. But we heard in the distance equality's call. A right isn't right till it's granted to all. The state set rules about who got to vote, and your gender, your race, and your wealth were of note. Could vote, could not vote. White men with property went to the polls, but the rest of the people were left off the rolls. The dream of democracy wasn't yet true. There were changes to make. There was work still to do. But we heard growing clearer equality's call. A right isn't right till it's granted to all. The rules about wealth were the first things to go. As more were enfranchised, their voices could grow. And a small group of voices was raising the fact that enslavement was wrong, an unspeakable act. Good people stood up for the truth that they knew. Abolition and suffrage were long overdue. This book right here says Sojourner's Truth, a biography. We heard ever louder equality's call. A right isn't right till it's granted to all. There was war in our nation and slavery ended. Amendments were added, the franchise extended. Vote here. No more men could, now more men could vote, at least so the law said, yet denial through taxes and tests were widespread. What will you vote for women's suffrage? Votes for women. And the voices of women were mostly omitted. In only some states was their voting permitted. But nothing could muffle equality's call. Give us vote now, votes for women. What will you do for women's suffrage? A right isn't right till it's granted to all. Suffragists didn't give up on the fight, and the 19th Amendment gave women the right. But voters of color still met with oppression. Their voting was hindered by brutal suppression. Now, although at this time, the 19th Amendment did give women the right to vote, it was mostly white women that were able to vote, not necessarily black women or women of color. So we passed legislation to make voting fair, to extend and protect voters' rights everywhere. So in 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act is passed. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act is passed. In 1965, the Selma to Montgomery March Voting Rights Act is passed. And in 1970, the first extension of Voting Rights Act. So that's only, if you think about 1970, that's only 50 years ago, right? It's not that long ago. We heard it. We felt it. Equality's call. A right isn't right till it's granted to all. The journey's not over. The work hasn't ended. Democracy's dream must be constantly tended. But where we are now is a debt that we owe to the work of more people than ever will know. Si pueden notar, esos artistas aquí están haciendo unas pancartas, some posters. So we're going to be making some posters as well. And each time we vote, we acknowledge that past. We honor our rights to ensure they will last. For to vote is to answer equality's call. And each time we vote with them all. Ahora, les quiero recordar, artistas, que aunque sí es importante que votemos, no todos tenemos acceso a votar, ¿verdad? Entonces, todavía hay muchas leyes que no dejan a muchas personas votar, pero quiero que pienses, si tú I want to remind everyone that although we are, there's a lot of attention to voting, right? There's still many people that are not allowed to vote, right? There's a lot of policies and laws that are passed in order to suppress a majority of people's voting rights still till this day. Quiero que piensen para este proyecto. Hagan unas listas de qué cosas quisieran ustedes cambiar en su comunidad. ¿Qué tipo de cosas quieren cambiar que quisieran votar? ¿Verdad? ¿O qué tipo de líderes quisieran tener? ¿Verdad? ¿Qué quieres que tu líder, el presidente, el senador, la persona, the older person, ¿verdad? En tu región, las diferentes oficinas de tu estado, de tu ciudad, ¿qué quisieran que hicieran para tu familia, para tu comunidad, ¿verdad? I want you to make a list of things that you would want your older person, your senator, your city council, right? The president, for them to do in order to make sure that your family and your community is represented. Y asegurarnos, como dice el libro, ¿verdad? Que todas las leyes, todas las cosas que tengamos sean igual para todos, ¿verdad? What kind of things would you want those people that are in government to think about to make sure that everything is equal for everyone? Ok, artistas, pues gracias por leer este libro con nosotros, por escuchar. Quiero que otra vez hagan una lista de qué tipo de cosas quieren hacer y quiero que piensen por qué es importante que votemos, ¿verdad? Por qué es importante que estemos involucrados en este proceso para asegurarnos que las personas que estén en poder, que estén representando a todos, ¿verdad? Para los beneficios de todos y no solamente de a unos. All right, pues gracias artistas. Recuerden, all power to all people. Hasta la próxima.